Are now ready to hear about human resources, and in your time period, I think we plan for about half of your time for presentation and half of the time for Q&A, and you're scheduled for about 30 minutes. So thank you.
Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm going to have Erin Knapp, who's my supervisor over the administrative services, and she's going to go through the budget presentation, and then JJ, Eric, and Christy and I will address any questions that you have, okay?
Okay, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. Is it visible yet?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, great. As Evelyn mentioned, my name is Erin Knapp, and I'm joined by our team, Evelyn, Christy, Eric, and JJ this morning. As you can see from our introductory page here of our presentation, the Human Resources Department budget is truly made up of 3 separate division budgets. So HR, benefits and wellness, and the risk and safety. Okay. In this slide, this view, we're still looking at the whole department, all 3 divisions combined. In terms of revenue, I would offer that Human Resources, this division, receives some general fund support, 1.65% of the total from the general fund. That equates to about 1.2 million in this upcoming fiscal year. HR also receives allocations, so the charges for services that's reflected here. So allocations paid by other departments to Human Resources. In risk and benefits, they also receive charges for services allocations from countywide, different departments based on different factors for the services that are provided in benefits and risk, as well as other forms of revenue, such as insurance premiums. That makes up our revenue incoming for the department as a whole. As far as expenditures, the majority of our expenditures truly are for operating expenses through materials and services, personnel costs. We do have a small amount that's for cost allocations that we pay to other county departments, other internal services departments. You'll also see reserves and contingencies are reflected in this expenditures lines within our department budget. Still looking at the department as a whole, our overall budget for this upcoming fiscal year is just over 72 million. Our operating revenues over the years since fiscal year 17-18 has been pretty flat, hovering around 40 million over this time frame. Operating expenditures, we are seeing a slight increase in this fiscal year of about 7%. That's based on some factors within the benefits fund, administration costs, and some claims. So that's kind of where that's coming from this year, but otherwise it has been trending, fairly flat. As far as the interfund transfer that you see reflected for the first time this year, that's based on a rebate that the risk fund, based on their performance, is able to return to the county's general fund. So that's kind of a reflection of some stability, and it kind of addresses one of the questions that came from the budget committee about stability of our budget, and that was seen as a real good example of that in terms of the risk fund and how they're doing and performing and able to address the issues that are arising and mitigating those risks. You'll also see increase over the years of contingency funds and reserves, and that's really just in benefits and in risk. Human Resources being part of the county's general fund, doesn't have any of those within our budget. And the benefits staff has been working really hard to be able to state those funds, those reserves and contingencies within their budget, also reflecting kind of the stability of the funds at this point. Human resources receiving funds through allocations and some general fund really, also is deemed as stable in terms of that kind of source of income and based to provide the services that we offer. And this next slide addresses the overall department still, yet breaks it down a little more by division. So you can see that within the Human Resources Division, there are 3 lines of business. There are 6 programs, and all of the Human Resources Division is found within the county's general fund. The amounts along the side in yellow on the right-hand side kind of reflect how our general fund support is divided among our different programs. We allocate within each program based on personnel costs, other expenses, so that we have a true reflection of each program, and do the same with our general fund support. The benefit self-insurance fund, the total for this year is 49 million. Risk management, 18 million, and within HR, it's just under 5 million. And our number of FTE is flat at 43 for this year, in the upcoming fiscal year as well. And overall, I would just point out that our overall increase for the entire department is a 6% increase over last year, with an over 8% decrease in general fund support received from the county. Okay, at this point, I'll turn it over to Evelyn and the rest of the team.
Okay, am I on? Okay, so this slide here, we just wanted to highlight some of our major accomplishments from 2019. And the biggest one for us is the equal pay, and that project is still underway. We're not done with that yet. We have surveyed most of the county operations employees in represented groups. Pending still is the sheriff's personnel and our community corrections. So we have had surveys out to them. We're in the process of reviewing those right now. The next project that was accomplished this year, as I think I've shared, we came before you earlier in this fiscal year, the need for us to update our ERP system. But before we could do that, we wanted to get a sense of what it would cost to update our system. So we did hire a consulting firm, Plant Moran, who came in and they did a cost estimate for us, and that was completed and presented to the county administrator. So that work was done. The employee engagement survey, we conducted an employee engagement survey countywide this year. That is still in the pending stage. We have results from the survey. Next steps for us on that is to begin action planning to address where we have some opportunities to improve our work environment. Employee and labor relations, busy activity in that area, but we've negotiated 30 contracts and 51 additional agreements as well. Benefits and risks, as you can see there, that the benefits reserved has been collected and is fully stated. I can't read all the slides, so I can't see what's all there. On the risk side, as Aaron has pointed out, we've implemented and updated our REN system. We replaced the existing legacy system, and there's more there that I can't see. So Eric or you might want to step in and say something on that last one. Is there, yeah,
Thank
because I
you,
can't
Evelyn.
see
Yeah, I'll
it.
just say
Yeah.
we implemented updated our RIMIS system, replaced our existing legacy system. I'm very excited that we were able to do that, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we would have been in a much worse position from a risk standpoint and able to understand where we are in this last 2 months. So this has helped us extensively.
Okay, Arian, next slide. Okay, so you can see here, this is where the budget reductions that we took, again, and primarily in some programs, but mostly in operational needs that we had. So we reduced our office furniture and supplies. We took we reduced monies in our professional services. This is really where we have the bulk of our resources. And as you see, there's slot arbitrations. Our goal is to have the departments pay for arbitrations that are generated as a result of a grievance within their own operations, but we retain money for arbitrations for contract purposes that are county-wide. We had a reduction in our training fund. We took a reduction in the A-team. The A-team is the employee activity group that is responsible for like our employee picnics, any special events that we provide for our employees countywide. There was a reduction taken in, and the title here is advertising, but this is really a reduction in the operation cost for recruitment and selection efforts. Then we also took a reduction, of course, as you can see in the computers, any computer equipment and et cetera, and in printing and duplications, and then of course in our travel. So that's pretty much where we took the reductions for the 2019 budget, okay? That ends our presentation. So now we can open it up for any questions that you have for us.
We have Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Evelyn, thank you for the presentation. I think the work that you do is absolutely essential in order to keep our functions and our employees and all the risk and everything else that you do. It's just essential for our operations. Without the people that make the county work and without your department to be there to support that, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. I did have a question I'm asking all the departments, and that is, how many new hires have you had in the last 12 months? And so let's just start with that one.
So JJ will be able to answer that for you. We have those stacks with us.
Okay.
You're on mute, JJ.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Savas, are you asking about hires within human resources or countywide?
Within human resources.
Oh, within okay.
Let's see. So I'm trying to think within the last 12 months.
We've had two. So we just, Jerry Oswald retired and we replaced her. And then we had a classification analyst took another position, and we've replaced that individual. And we've had a benefits person that also retired, and we repurposed that position and added that position into the classification and compensation division. And so we've hired there. So total within our department, we've hired 3 people. We also have the numbers countywide. I thought that's what you were asking, but within our department, 3.
We may have had, I'm trying to remember the 4th position in labor and employee relations might have been within the last 12 months. Is that right?
Shelley?
It was, yes.
Oh, Shelley, okay.
I also think the position in the HR specialist in WDM fell within this fiscal year too.
Okay. So I'm going to get to the countywide one soon, but the other question I have is that I've heard, not just in Clackamas County, but around the region, that because of the COVID crisis, a number of people that were considering retirement or near retirement might be just saying, you know what, this is it. I'm going to retire. I'm concerned maybe about how safe the workplace is, or whether or not or choosing to do something completely different. And I don't know how real that is. What's the pulse right now? Are you seeing that? Because if anyone's going to see that, it's going to be your department first. You're going to have those discussions. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking for who those people are, of course, but I am asking, are you seeing any trend or a trend building in which we would see a number of retirements or people exiting the county?
Not as a result of COVID-19. No, I haven't seen an increase. It's more normal. Attrition, people retiring because they're at the end of their tenure, moving on to do something else, but not as a result of this, not yet.
Okay. Thank you for that. That helps clarify one thing that we were discussing even yesterday. So the big question is that last year we implemented the hiring freeze, and I think at some point, I think the administrator indicated that he was going to make it or transition to a hard freeze. So I don't know if how that actually worked or whether or not, but we have a normal attrition rate through the county, and I remember the number being actually a lot higher than I thought. I think it was north of 200 normal attrition rate through the county. I've heard numbers as high as 400 or 500. So maybe you can refresh us on maybe what those numbers are and how many. And I know that you were put together a specific amount of paperwork to submit to the administrator for all new hires under that hiring freeze criteria. So can you just update us, number one, on what the normal attrition rate is, and number two, how and what numbers you brought before administration for review for potential rehires, or not rehires, but refilling positions?
Okay, so what stacks we have today that we can share is what the hiring has done. I don't know that we have the numbers of how many positions we've went before review, but we can certainly get you those numbers. So JJ, you can speak to the total number of hires and what you've seen as a maybe an impact to the hiring freeze.
Certainly, and I would add, I know that there's some budget staff on board on this call. I don't know if they have any of the information because they are a very close partner with us in that process to review those requests with the county administrator. If not, we're more than happy to follow up with our class comp staff to get some more information on that. But what I can tell you, I actually crunched some numbers quickly this morning because I had heard from one of our staff members that this was a question that was raised late in the meeting yesterday. So our target hires are 320 per year. That's what we anticipate. And I can tell you that last calendar year, so calendar year 2019, our actual hires were 326. So we were slightly over what we had projected. Since this calendar year is not yet complete, I looked at our hires for the last 12 months, which corresponds pretty nicely when County Administrator Schmidt put into effect the hiring freeze. So the dates that I used were May 28th of 2019 to yesterday, 5/27 of 2020. And the actual hires for that 12-month period were 267. So that does represent a decrease of 22%. While I can't say that's completely due to the hiring freeze, especially since this does include the COVID event, but I do believe that the hiring freeze has had some effectiveness in reducing the number of requests that departments are submitting to fill their vacant positions.
Okay, that's really helpful. I mean, that's good to hear. Is it possible to find out what departments those are? And I guess what I'm really after is to figure out how much of that is general fund. It's less significant, for example, in West because they're rate funded. It's not general fund, so they need to do what they need to do, and they have the revenue base to do it with. But I think what's really in trouble here for us is, and we're trying to cope with, is a general fund. So I'd like to know by department maybe where those 22% of was realized.
Absolutely. So are
Yeah,
you just wanting to
we
know
can do
how
that.
many vacancies that were filled by that amount?
Yeah, yeah. In which departments? Yeah, which departments
Okay.
they were. Thank you. That's
Absolutely.
all I have. I did have a question on the progress. I know that we implemented some software, I believe, for you to help with our succession and our planning. And I know there was a program that you were initiating, just I guess a progress report. I'm sorry I don't recall exactly what that was, but I do know that we wanted to step up our efforts, and knowing that we were because of the baby boomers retiring, that we had a program in place to help fill those positions and bring in some talent where we needed it.
So just for clarification, I assume you're talking about the workforce planning. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So in terms of what we've done to date, Sherry Reedman is our workforce planning coordinator, and she works under the direction of the workforce planning manager. She's worked mostly with just a few departments in developing workforce plans, which would include some succession planning, but more or less a workforce plan identifying specific knowledge and skills that they need and where they're going organizationally. So we really haven't made as much progress as I would have liked to see in that area. It's kind of a slow horse coming out of the gate. So we're not making as much progress in that area as I would like. So we're still chiseling at it.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess this is maybe for later, and I don't know which staff are listening, maybe Elizabeth. Based on the number that we just heard, the delta between an average of 326 and the 267 FTE count, I think that delta is 59 positions. On tab 2, page 5, that FTE count, that's not represented there. So maybe we can find later on for discussion where those numbers are realized, because what's presented here is I don't see a reduction of 59 FTE in tab 2, page 5.
Yeah, what he's referring to our reviewer's guide. It's on the website next to the budget message tab at the beginning of yesterday's presentations. And what we have on page 5, I believe, is the budgeted FTE from last fiscal year to the budgeted FTE of this year. And then what we're actually I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, and then what we're talking about, the 37 FTEs reduced is actuals, which we're discussing when we're talking about the budget cuts. And what I hear JJ referencing is an average of prior calendar years to the actual of last calendar year. Is that correct, JJ?
That was actuals for both years. I mentioned the target, but then the actuals. Okay. And I'm not sure if this answers the question or not, but Commissioner Savas, the correlation isn't going to necessarily match because departments carry vacant positions on their budget. Right. And so that's probably the difference that you're seeing. So I'm referring to the number of hires we made, which won't correspond with the number of vacancies that we have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to some degree. I understand it's not an apples for apples. I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, JJ.
Sure.
Mr. Feely?
Yes. Good morning, Evelyn.
Good morning.
You mentioned you had a consultant do a study and an estimate on the costs of an ERP solution. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the cost estimate was and what components of an ERP that covered?
Wow.
Sorry, I spent my last year at my prior employer
Oh, that's
implementing
okay.
ERPs.
So and I don't have my technical expert
Oh,
on
that's
with
fine.
us. So, but the component was looking at the ERP, looking at both the HR side
Okay.
as well as the finance side.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Okay, so it was a combination of the two. As you may recall, Tom, HR completed a year ago a business process review
Right.
of all of our business processes and to see how our current PeopleSoft system was supporting it and where there were gaps. Right. Okay, so that work was completed on the HR side. Then finance has started that work following HR in also looking at their business processes to see how the system was supporting and where there were gaps. So that work has been completed. The next step was then looking at taking that data that we collected from the consultant and working with a vendor to give us a cost of what would it cost us to put a system in place. So that's the work that has been completed this fiscal year. And now it has been put on hold. We're not moving any further because of our budget situation. This is where we are now. So we do have costs of what it would cost, the types of programs, what a system would cost us, what it would take to implement a system. And so we have that data when the county is ready to move to the next step.
What was the cost estimate?
Huh?
What was the cost estimate?
Oh gosh, I don't have it.
Ballpark?
It was over $1 million, I can tell you that.
Oh my God, it would be far more than that, quite frankly.
Yeah, I can't.
This is Elizabeth.
Hey.
Anywhere from 8 to 16 million.
Okay.
I can't remember, yeah.
That seems low to me. I know the city of Portland's initial estimate from GFOA was 13 million, and I think we spent over 80.
I don't think it was that high. I want to say, I think it was under 10 million. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, keep an eye on that.
Okay.
Another question, what collective bargaining unit agreements are still open and for negotiation that would affect next year's budget?
Okay, well, next year we'll have a big impact. We just finished community corrections, so we're now in the process of negotiating the sheriff's union.
Okay.
This year, yeah, and then next year we're preparing this year for the employee association and ASME. Okay. So we'll have all of the ASME contracts and the EA contracts open. So we're looking at the 6 bargaining groups.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And then my final question is about benefit costs, health benefit costs. What are you projecting for next year in terms of rate increases?
Okay, I have Christy Durham on the line, the benefits manager, and she'll be able to address that question.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for your question. I actually am curious, are you referring to related to COVID? Or
no,
are you
I'm just talking what is programmed into the proposed budget. You must have made an assumption on benefit rates.
Yes, we did. And we were assuming around a 7% increase, to speak in general terms.
And do I recall correctly that you're self-insured other than the insured product of Kaiser?
Correct. We are self-funded for 2 Providence plans, and then as well for our dental and for our disability.
Okay.
Fully insured for vision.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Humberston?
Yes, Evelyn. Hello. For the next 6 months, do you have any idea how many people are intending to retire? Do you have any waiting in the queue, or they're giving you an idea that they want to retire in the next 6 months?
I don't have anything. I don't know the numbers, but I can get those numbers for you. I don't know off the top of my head, how many people are waiting to retire and if we have pending personnel actions to process, because it doesn't come into us usually until, some departments are a little better at letting us know and giving us more advance notice than others. And sometimes we'll have a month notice, sometimes less than that. So those, I don't really have anything pending right now with folks wanting to retire.
So there's nobody in the queue right now actually saying I'm retiring on June 31st.
I would have to check. I don't know the numbers.
I see. Okay. The reason I'm asking the question is that obviously attrition would have an impact potentially on the general fund. And so if the more you know about how many people are prepared to retire and you know how their positions are funded, that would be useful information for Elizabeth Comfort in terms of forward thinking on adjusting the budget. So
and you're interested in those retirements that would be in effect as of June 30th or the next year as well?
6 months.
Basically the next 6 months to a year. If you had some estimate on that and the impact on the general fund, I think that would be helpful for Ms. Comfort in terms of her prognostications going forward,
Okay.
In terms of savings in the general fund.
Okay.
And then obviously it has to be balanced against what positions have to be replaced versus which positions can remain vacant.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, if I may, I just want to point out that we're overall, I think it's about 40 minutes off our schedule. So I notice we have one more question, and then I'd like to be able to move our third presentation in so that we could get that done before we take a quick break. Okay, thank you. Brenda?
Commissioner Savage?
Yeah, just building on what Commissioner Humberston just stated and the clarification, if we could get the that retirement number and then an affirmation from both the department head as to whether or not that would be a position to be refilled or not, and then that approval likeliness or not from the administrator, whether or not that would be something under the hiring freeze that he would actually put into place. So I just want to make sure that clarification is complete and that goes all the way up to the top to the administrator. Thank you.
Okay.
And then Evelyn, before we release you guys, thank you. Were there some advanced questions that you had responses to that you haven't had a chance to voice? Were there other questions that the committee had asked?
There was one other question.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that question had to do with, it was related to our equity efforts.
Yes.
And the diversity of our workforce. I believe we have not addressed that question. And JJ has those numbers as well. And so she can address that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, JJ.
Your mic's on.
Sorry, I can unmute myself. Okay, so yes, and for the benefit of everyone, the question was about adding a performance measure that lays out how the diversity of county staff reflects the community we serve. We agree it is important to add an EDI related measure. We will be working very closely with the new Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion staff that are in the process of being hired to review our current county EEO plan, our HR equity plan, and strategize what measure or measures should be created and in which department MFR plans they should be placed. Our plan is to add an EDI measure for recruitment and selection by or before this time next year. I also had, and I don't know if you have time for it today, but I had wanted to share with you the steady progress that we've made over the years as an organization, continuing to increase the diversity of our workforce. I'll just tell you where we're at right now is 14.71% of our workforce is people of color. Just to give you an idea, compared to about the same time last year, that increased from 13.66%. But over the years, we've had a very steady increase back from when we've started tracking this all the way back in 1989, our people of color was 3.35%. So every year, with the exception of a couple, we've had a steady increase in that number and are continuing to make great progress with the help of our hiring managers and department directors.
Great. Thank you so much, JJ. Appreciate that. All right. Sean or Brenda, Sean Caldwell has a question.
That was my question. So I just want to say a little bit more about it. I think it's important information because it goes to not only recruitment efforts and retention efforts, it also goes to the services that we're providing to the community, that there's cultural competency, that there's bilingual staff here to help people. So I think it's important. I ask about it every year. You probably know it. So I'm hoping that we can just include that as a performance measure going forward. And I'll just say the next phase to that is looking at cultural competency and diversity in the contractors that we're using to provide services. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sean. I'm seeing no other hands, and Evelyn and crew, hey, we thank you very, very much. It's always good to see you. Thank you. Thanks for the great work you do for Clackamas County.